All right, guys, welcome back to Establish the Pass podcast presented by Clutch Points. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. With me, as always, my co-host, Dylan Reagan, back here to make our picks for Week 3 of the 2024 NFL season. Dylan, as I tell you every time, anytime you decide to buy into the hype of a certain team, it's always best to kind of, slow that hype down a little bit. And we know last week when we did our games of the week, our betting locks, our upsets, specials, as always, our betting locks are always, the ones we have fun with. And I told you last week, this is the kind of game the Cowboys, really show who they are. And they may have shown who they are, but not exactly the way we expected. And so it sets up for an interesting Week 3 because it's just been, you said Week 2 was a weird week in the NFL. It wasn't just the Cowboys-Saints game, but a lot of other interesting ones where you have the Ravens falling to 0-2 and a lot of kind of wild storylines here as we head into Week 3.
Yeah, felt pretty good after our first week. I think we had like between 10 to 13 correct picks each. And last week, a little different story. Like you said, just a lot of as some week 1 things did carry over. But yeah, plenty did not, especially like what you said with the Cowboys. The Saints, clearly they're playing week 1 against the Panthers carried over. We'll see how long they can ride this train. Clint Kubiak, that looked like a just absolute outcoached masterclass from the Saints, which is not something we've really said since Sean Payton was there. A lot of interesting things, like you said, the Ravens and Bengals both falling to 0-2, the Rams literally falling apart. More on that when we get to their game. It's going to be a lot of guys out for that one against the Niners. But yeah, it's been an interesting couple of weeks, but last week especially, we kind of turned some things on its head, and you're still so early. So, like you're saying, as soon as you buy into the hype of one thing, it might fall off. I'm worried for a few teams where that could be the case, but that's a great thing about the NFL. You just keep playing, you keep proving yourself each week, and all you can do is face the team that's in front of you, right? So some teams are going to get some harder opponents, and overall it kind of balanced itself out. But we're still in a weird kind of part where, yeah, if you told, even though it's only 2 weeks in, if you told me the top 4 teams in DVOA through 2 weeks would be the Saints, Seahawks, Chargers, and Vikings, I would have not really bought into that. But that just shows you what Sam Darnold, Derek Carr, and Geno have done it, as well as this Chargers defense. So yeah, it's been a kind of a topsy-turvy first couple of weeks, and we'll see how it all balances out. But a lot of different things that have been happening where, a lot made of the passing stats being down, and a lot of teams, embracing some of the things that Brian Flores excelled with, and that Vikings defense taking it to another level. It feels like this year it's been a lot of fun to see a lot of different ideas that are and how impactful those can be for some of these teams that we didn't expect to have such hot starts, and maybe some that, even though they're 0-2, as we get to these games, going to find that it's still a little optimistic about at least a few teams with 0-2 records. Not everyone, though. Yeah,
may not be a certain team. I did wear my Rams hoodie today, as you can see, to try to give Dylan all the support I can give his Rams. But we'll see if that works out for us on our picks later, because if you're not aware of who they're playing this week, may not exactly be the best matchup to get off the schneid there for the Rams. But all right, we start with our games of the week, and there will be a common theme with these two because we did mention the Saints and Cowboys. But we start with the Eagles at the Saints. The Saints are 2.5-point favorites in this game. And, I think for the Eagles, coming off of a just inexplicable loss to the Falcons, I don't know how else you say it, they had the game won, and then Kirk Cousins leads the drive to win it for the Falcons. And meanwhile, the Saints just absolutely took it to the Cowboys last week in a way that I don't know that any of us could have expected, even despite them doing what they did to the Panthers in week 1. So sets up for an interesting showdown here in New Orleans, Dylan. And for all I said about the Saints last week and how I wasn't quite sold just yet, well, I'm a little more sold now, to the point where I'm going to pick them to win this game against the Eagles.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty decent after what we just saw against a Cowboys team that, as we've talked about, has struggled with teams that have used heavier personnel going back to last season. And it felt like, the Cowboys radio announcer said as much. It felt very similar to the Packers playoff game with some of the explosive plays. At one point, they're averaging over 10 yards per play, right? It was just like a ridiculous level of efficiency, tons of play action, tons of screens, tons of good things from Kubiak to, give answers to Carr, but also to take pressure off an offensive line that is still the part of this team that you have concerns about long term. But the pass rush on the edges hasn't really been fantastic yet for the Eagles. And They've had, some moments of flashes where Jalen Carter will, make a great play, and you see those things, but just the consistency down to down for that defense. And we saw the secondary, some of the concerns we had going back to last season kind of just immediately showed up again there in that final drive where with a blink of an eye, the Falcons were inside the 15-yard line. So still have concerns there about where the Eagles defense is going to go long-term. Some good things in that game from their offense. I would say that even though, they were a Saquon catch away from winning that game, though, it was pretty even. There was just some, big stops in the red zone, and that is where the Eagles defense has excelled through the first 2 weeks, and it's a big reason they won the Packer game and should have won the game against the Falcons. The problem is the Saints are scoring before they get to the red area quite a bit, and it just feels like at this point I just have a hard time seeing that this Eagles defense is going to respond to a level down in the Superdome to stop the Saints offense. And maybe this will be the week where it backfires the hype on the Saints, but I don't know. They've kind of broken the some of these analytical models, like their total DVOA is like almost double the number 2 team because of just how dominant that offense has been. They haven't really had to do anything late in games. Maybe that's something where, we've seen Philly already with 2 close games down to the wire, that if this one gets close, we'll see what Jalen Hurts can do. And I was pretty encouraged by him, and, AJ Brown's status obviously means a lot and did show up at times, but I think there's some good things to see with that offense for them, but it's a tough fit that you're going to be facing with the Saints defense. I just think they're, at this point, it's only 2 weeks, but still look like a more complete team. The Saints are my pick as well.
All right. Now we get to the Cowboys, who are going to host the surprisingly frustrated Baltimore Ravens, who, of course, lost that game. Another sort of felt like inexplicable loss to the Raiders for Baltimore at home. And now they head in to play an angry Cowboys team that's just looking for answers. At this point, after looking so good in week 1 against the Browns, Ravens are 1.5-point favorites in this game in Arlington. Boy, I think this is, for me, Dylan, I'm willing to look at that game for the Cowboys, just sort of a one-off game where they just played awful. I don't know that I'm, necessarily going to just jump off just yet, although the hype train is probably not going at the speed it was last week. But the Ravens are 0-2. I just think this is, to me, more about the Ravens absolutely having to win this game. If they do, it puts both teams at 1-2. Still not a great place to be, but it's hard to just see the Ravens, even though they're not a huge favorite here, dropping 0-3, even in what looks like a tough matchup against the Cowboys.
Yeah, it's one that I don't know if they have the explosiveness to put together some of the plays we've seen some teams put against Dallas. But again, a heavier personnel group that is often using 2 tight ends or 2 backs at the fullback. So I don't, the Dallas defense going back, they're committing so many guys to try to stop the run, and they still can't do it. It's leaving them more vulnerable on the back end. Is Baltimore's offense able to take advantage of that the same way? That's what kind of a question, I guess, at this point. But I'm not too worried about the Ravens. I still think they're one of the best, despite their 0-2 record, one of the better teams in the league. The defense is still a bit of a concern. We knew there was going to be some turnover there. The offensive line hasn't been perfect. We saw some plays. They just struggled at times to get Derrick Henry going, and do wonder about that. But I think this is a good unit for them to do that against. And on the flip side, Dallas's offense needs to be a little more consistent. They did a good job, obviously, in week 1 against the Browns. How do they respond in this one? We saw Cleveland's defense really respond well, obviously, this past week, but still a group that on that side of the ball, that kind of weird conditions in Jacksonville. We'll see how they really fill out. But it should be there's a reason the spread is right where it is. It's just, despite their 0-2 start, the Ravens are still top 10 in DVOA, and unfortunately, because of Dallas's struggles especially with their run defense at 31st so far, it's just I have questions about if they're really going to be able to stop Baltimore, even if they do commit those resources there. So I'm going to go with the Ravens getting off the schneid there and getting the victory. Dallas's offense still needs to kind of put some things together overall, where you saw some of the just hiccups where it doesn't stop and go, and it's mostly been in the passing game. And yes, they have CD, but it's still waiting for another kind of option to really emerge to make it so teams can't just kind of focus their game plan on stopping him. You're not going to completely stop him, but at least slowing him down. And I think Baltimore ultimately in this one is just a team I trust a bit more, but should be, if they go to 0-3 for the Ravens, I know we still have high hopes for them over the course of the year, but it's a schedule that's not exactly easy with the division they play in, as we know. Obviously you get 2 really, at least with the we get the Chiefs out of the way really quickly. We'll see what happens with those Raiders. It's a game that I think some of the win expectancy models showed 90% of the time the Ravens should have won. It was one of the higher, defying what the numbers kind of showed from that game, and a lot of big plays from the Raiders and impressive things that they did to get back in that game, but still have those questions about the Ravens finishing, and I hope they show up and kind of answer some of those in this one.
All right, well, now we get to the part where it's been a nice thing to fade, I think, me in the first couple of weeks of the season. And so now I'm going to use that same strategy for a certain team. And we get to our betting locks of the week. Remember, I am the one who picked the Cowboys last week against the Saints. So usually betting the opposite is your best friend here. But I am now fading the Panthers. And I know they just made the quarterback switch from Bryce Young to Andy Dalton. The problem is, Dylan, I don't think it makes a difference. Sure, initially you could have some things that Andy Dalton does better than Bryce Young, but I think it's more about the package around him than it is necessarily all on Bryce Young. I know Mel Kiper had a big rant about that, and I agree with a lot of the things that he said. The Panthers are at the Raiders. The Raiders are 5.5-point favorites. And I told you, I'm like, there wasn't really a scenario where I felt pretty confident in locking in the Raiders as a betting lock this early in the season. But I'm going to do it anyways, even at a weird 5.5 number here. If it was 3, give it to me. 4, sure. 5.5, it's just kind of that no man's land. But this is, to me, more about the Panthers. Raiders coming off a huge win, huge confidence boost to go win at Baltimore. Could see them having a little bit of a letdown here because you kind of go in knowing that you're playing the worst team in the league. But I'm going to take a shot and just pick the Raiders as a 5.5-point favorite here over the Panthers.
I think with the home cooking, they'll come out guns a-blazing. I think they'll respond from the Ravens game to be more on top of things early and kind of be like, all right, if we, play there's some throws early in the game that Gardner missed, guys coming open, but also the scheme kind of opening up and being like, we have Brock Bowers and Devontae, let's just feed them the rock. I think they're going to be okay on that front end. With the Panthers, it's just a group that it's not just the offense too. It's a defense that hasn't really shown us much through the first couple games. Obviously, losing Derek Brown was going to be a big blow for them over the course of the year, but it's just not a group that's going to be able to carry this team in any way. Yeah. Picking against the Panthers worked well last week with the Chargers, right? So I don't think it's a bad strategy here. The Raiders' offense has struggled to run the ball. Maybe this is a game where they can get those things right, but that's been kind of the one hiccup with them on the offensive side. Obviously, yes, with the quarterback play being a bit better, you do look at this team and offensive line that's not perfect by any means still. But it's just, I don't think the Panthers have the group to take advantage of that. We saw some of these games last year where the Raiders played teams that were inferior, and even if the Raiders weren't great, they still destroyed some of those teams. Think of the Giants game, think of the Charger game late in the season, all the injuries the Chargers have gone through, and it was the last game, the nail in the coffin for Brandon Staley's head coaching career with the Chargers. So I could totally see that happening again, and there'll be good vibes. I don't, a lot of, just because of the destination of Vegas, or so many fans of other teams that usually are coming there and helping to support their teams. I don't know if Panther fans are feeling like they're going to be paying for a trip to go across the country to watch this team quite yet. So I think also that it's going to be just a very pro Raider crowd. I think the building off of the just how exciting that win was for them. Saw all the reaction shots of Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco and Gardner and Devontae and everyone. This is a team that I think, instead of having to let down, I think they're going to build off it. So I'm with you. I would feel pretty good about picking them to cover this game too.
All right. You're going to go to the dreaded 6.5-point spreads that have been biting both of us. I think I picked 2 6.5-point spreads the first 2 weeks is one of my betting lock. I think it was the Bills, Cardinals, and then the Cowboys, Saints. Neither worked out in my favor, but the Broncos are at the Bucs. The Bucs are 6.5-point favorites in Tampa. Although this one's intriguing to me too. I almost considered it because I just don't think the Broncos are very good. Meanwhile, the Bucs come off a huge win in Detroit against the Lions. So certainly I'm going to pick the Bucs in this game. But also, despite my sort of mistakes in picking the spread in recent weeks, I also would not be against doing this as well, Dylan.
6.5. So I think the Chargers were 6.5 at the time I made that one last week. So that one worked out okay. It did not work. Yeah, the first week, not only similar to the Cowboys game last, I picked the Bengals to cover. Not only did they not, they obviously lost the Patriots. So doing okay. But I think the strategy of picking against certain teams at least is going to, the Panthers, we'll see how things play out. That might just be the one to ride with here. In this case, it was, we talked about it before, kind of came down to the Broncos here and the picking against them, or the Giants, two teams I just do not have a ton of faith in. Although the Giants were a team that same kind of win expectancy models had them, beating the Commanders a decent amount of the time. Not a lot of games, as you may have heard, of where teams score multiple touchdowns, don't give up any, and lose. The way that they did was kind of crazy with all the kicking woes and whatnot. But yeah, no, and this one with Denver, I mean, they just talk about a offense that just looks dysfunctional so far, in the bottom three, with just only ahead of Carolina, Chicago, and DVOA. Again, super early to be looking at DVOA, but still tells you it weights the strength of the opponent. So it's not like they're just playing bad against good teams. Not that the Steelers' defense is quite good, right? But it also just weights that and shows that this is not a functional offense to go right now. And the thing with Tampa Bay is, that was an impressive win. Maybe they haven't had two back-to-back big blowout wins like the Saints did, but to go into Detroit, and I know that the Saints went into Dallas too to win that game, but I still thought it was really impressive to see what Tampa did. Another game where they kind of defied the odds. They probably could have, in a lot of different, if you play that game again, probably don't come up on top, but they look like a competent team and a defense that's, even if it's not top 10 anymore, like as it has been in the past, it still feels just right on the next cusp. And I think there's enough things they can do to give Denver problems. It's still too early to know what's going to, to expect way too much of Bo Nix and that offense. Some flashes with the running game at times, but still a team that on that side of the ball that I going to play a kind of wait and see. Whereas Tampa's offense, that looks like it's going to be here to stay, at least passing the football. Running, definitely a problem as a Shard White fantasy owner in one league. Did not have the prettiest week there. But when they are throwing it, Baker looks great. Making some big plays when he needs to. And I think against a Denver defense, going from that pass rush of Aiden Hutchinson to a Denver group that has some talented players, but through the first couple of weeks, one of the worst pass defenses in the league. They defended the run much better. I think that matchup just tends to favor Tampa Bay enough where I think at home too, I feel definitely was going to be the pick for Tampa to win this game, but I feel okay about giving them a chance to get a touchdown win here and potentially a 2-score win. If you wanted to keep going up a couple points at that point, you might as well just get that extra field goal and see if you can get the odds a little better. Think that QB will throw for more than 300 yards? How about the receiver in Miami grabbing a touchdown? Check out DraftKings Pick 6, the newest way to compete against others and play fantasy football to win cash with DraftKings. Pick a player and choose if they'll have more or less of a specific stat like yards, touchdowns, catches, and more. Get your picks right and you'll win cash. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code ESTABLISH. That's code ESTABLISH for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer expires 9/19. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. 1 per new customer. Reward issued at $50 in non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 6 months. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at NFL.com/terms.
Sure. That's not a bad idea either, I think, given where these two teams are at right now. All right, to our upsets of the week. I feel like I'm going down the same path as I did with the Cowboys. It's just like anytime you want to believe in this certain team, they always seem to let you down. And so, Dylan, I'm going to go against our rule on the podcast here for years, and that is somehow having confidence in the Chargers And especially in a spot like this where they go on the road to play another team that is, surprisingly, maybe not so much so after winning last week against Denver, but the Steelers have started 2-0 and the Chargers are 2-0. The Steelers are 1.5-point favorites in this game. I can't believe I'm doing it, but the Jim Harbaugh-led Chargers, give me them to go to 3-0 as my upset of the week. But I'm telling you right now, if the Chargers lose this game and, maybe they lose by 10 points or something, I may never pick the Cowboys or Chargers ever again because those two teams have they have hurt us over the years in terms of how many times that we pick them and they don't come through for us. So.
Yeah, it's it's a tough game. I think my favorite one, again, we kind of talked about this even ahead of last week, looking ahead, 35.5 over under for the Chargers and Steelers. I like that under. I know it's already a really low figure, but man, I just see this game being smash mouth football, especially with Herbert having the ankle injury. It sounds like he's going to be fine to go, right? But nonetheless, still a game that I just don't know exactly what that passing offense is going to look like consistently. I know Quentin Johnson got a couple nice plays there against Carolina, but this is a much different defense you're going to be facing in Pittsburgh, and two defenses that, the Chargers, there's the main reason that when I mentioned those four teams at the top of DVOA through 2 weeks is their defense, not their offense. They're number one through 2 weeks on that side of the ball. Third against the rush and first against the pass. And that run defense will get tested here, but that physicality that we saw in week one against the Raiders, it just stood out that this wasn't the same Chargers group of the last however many years, even before Staley was there, where you just felt like teams could kind of will themselves through it. And a lot of those versions of the Chargers, I'd be picking the Steelers, even with the concerns I still have for them on the offensive side, where, they haven't looked exactly perfect. Neither of the Chargers, both teams are kind of neck and neck. With their rankings there, actually with the pass game with Pittsburgh a bit higher than you might expect at 9th through 2 weeks and DVOA. It's a game that I think just even like the models they have with the DVOA stuff have this being very close. I mean, there's a reason the spread's where it's at. It has the Steelers winning by 1.8 points. So I mean, it's basically right on here. But something just. I know Justin's looked okay, and maybe he'll make some big plays to give the Steelers a win here. But something about the way the Chargers have kind of come out, you're like you said, it feels dangerous, but at the same time, one that I think can go either way. And obviously, both teams have great kickers. I think special teams wise, there's reasons to think they're pretty even too. So I'll go with the Chargers as well. But man, like you said, it's a different feel for the Chargers group. This is a test, right? This is like, all right, They got the Chiefs after this too. I know the Chargers have some games that are definitely winnable games in their schedule, but some games that are gotten a lot tougher with the way the Cardinals have looked and the Saints coming up after a Broncos game. So it's not the easiest road to navigate. This will be a big one for, when we look at playoff positioning, and I was not going to be saying the Chargers are going to overtake the Chiefs in the AFC West or anything. But when we're looking at wild card positioning, this is a game that actually could, factoring a decent amount into tiebreakers and whatnot. And we look back and actually end up being pretty impactful. And I just think long term, I'm still intrigued by what Jim Harbaugh's got going on there with the Chargers.
Well, let's see if you're intrigued by the Malik Willis revenge game here as the Packers head to Nashville to play the Titans. The Titans are 3-point favorites in this game. Now, again, I think the uncertainty here is going to come with Jordan Love. And is it possible? Maybe. We don't know. Recording this in the middle of the week, so you just never know on these kind of things. But if it is the Malik Willis, revenge spot, I don't know. This is another one I think is tough to choose here. Yes, the Packers look good against the Colts, but I think a lot of that was just the Colts really struggling on offense. Anthony Richardson can never sort of find a rhythm, which I think will kind of be a theme this season in terms of the inconsistency maybe. But, again, Dylan, this is like bizarro for me where I'm all of a sudden picking the Chargers and Titans in these kind of games. But I'm going to pick the Titans here, and I know they are the favorite in this game, but I still think the Packers, even with Willis at quarterback, can do a lot of things to really, test the Titans. Because as we're seeing right now, Will Levis is not playing well. Those kind of mistakes can cost you in games like this. And, we've kind of seen that play out for this team. So that worries me a bit. I just don't trust the Titans on offense, but the defense can be pretty good. And I think, having some familiarity with the likely quarterback on the other side and Willis may help the Titans a little bit here. So I'll take the Titans, but in no way confident about it.
Our two upset picks here have the even with the Patriots Jets game this week. These are the two lowest over unders, 36.5 here for a reason. For a lot of the things you just mentioned about the struggles of obviously with how Anthony Richardson looked, but really still both of these offenses and their current forms. Obviously, if Jordan Love is able to go, this is going to flip, and this will no longer be really an upset pick. But as of today, it doesn't appear that's the case. So I got a little burned, I think, with how I felt about going into last week with that game against the Colts, and maybe this is too much of a trigger reaction, because I do think the Titans have been right there where a few things go differently with some of the turnovers from Levis, where that team is 1-1 at least, maybe 2-0. I think that's at least the defense has played that well, and maybe I'm not, their rush defense is kind of more in the middle of the pack. So maybe that's where I'm looking at some of the creativity of what Matt LaFleur did. I just excited to see kind of what that group can do again. And I think some of the things they opened up gives them a chance here, still, right there at the top of DVOA and offense through 2 weeks, even though, a lot of that's going to be weighted to the first game, but still some encouraging things. Their run offense in particular kind of boosted up. And that's the part of the Titans defense where I do wonder if that's the weaker point, and maybe they can dedicate more guys to the box, and they're going to probably do so to challenge Willis. It'll be a cat and mouse game. So I feel decent again about the under here. I really don't think it's going to be too high scoring, but I think the Packers are just a really well-coached team. You saw the offensive line and some of these guys really making some big moves up front against, the Colts defense has some bigger question marks than Tennessee's at this point. But I was impressed by that. Maybe the Titans will, on the flip side, though, be able to run the ball. I think that is something they should kind of lean into. We know this Packers defense has, struggled with that, even though, again, last week, like you said, a lot of it was more of Richardson's struggles rather than just what they're doing. Well, we see the same things with Levis, potentially. But I'll go with Green Bay. I just don't want to get burned picking against Matt LaFleur twice in a row, even though a lot of me sees a path here. If Levis could just hold onto the ball, they can run the ball well enough where Tennessee can find a way to get it done. But it should be a slog, I think, again, in one of those games that, maybe it won't be on red zone a ton, but when you actually are tuning into it, should be some intriguing things happening with. I've liked a lot of obviously what Matt LaFleur did with the running game, some throwing back some stuff from the 80s and 90s college run games and pro run, like just a lot of fun different things with multiple backs where I think they'll continue to lean into that if they have to. They're going to probably need to in this game.
All right, now we get to our quick picks, and we start with the Patriots at the Jets. Jets 6-point favorites on Thursday Night Football. Again, Patriots have surprised some people, I think, with the way they played thus far. But I'll take the Jets here, Dillon, who, of course, got back on track with the win against the Titans. And I think, the Jets defense to me may be the difference maker. And what should still be, I think, a close game. Would not feel great at all about that 6-point spread in the Jets' favor.
Yeah, the spread was a little too high for me. I think it's exactly what you said, though. The defense for the Jets is kind of the tipping point, because I feel so good about what New England's done and how they look on that side of the ball. Maybe some things got exposed a little bit last week with Seattle with the multiplicity they have. I think there's just some good things going. We'll talk about the Seahawks in a second. So I'm not looking too far into that with New England's defense. I think they'll bounce back and have a good week. But it's a tough unit that the Titans at the Jets just faced. And I think you saw some good responses from them. Obviously, they lose Jermaine Johnson on their own defense for the year with the Achilles injury. Do wonder about the lack of the pass rush and what that could mean here. New England's going to be running the ball a lot, as we've have learned, and not surprising by any means in the early going, but they haven't been like an overly effective group. And both teams are kind of off to like starts where you look at things and it's like, all right, the Patriots could be easily 2-0, but still not a perfect fit. And the defense definitely maybe not as as dominant as they looked against the Bengals as one game. And the Jets, I liked how they kind of figured things out. Hearing about Aaron Rodgers basically battling with Hackett to get some of these two back sets with Allen and Braylon Allen and Breece Hall in there at the same time, and it worked for that last touchdown. It worked for a few plays out there in general. I think the Jets are discovering their identity. Aaron Rodgers still, even if he doesn't have hasn't really looked like some of his former dominant self. So he's still hitting some of the hits, a lot of these go balls that he's throwing right on the money, right in guys' bread baskets. Some of the stuff, quick game over the middle that I think against New England, they're going to be sniffing that stuff out. So the predictability at times for the Jets is something that I think they hopefully can work on. And I think Aaron and they're well cognizant of. So I think that the Jets are still just a better complete team in this game, but this is one I told you I thought about flipping it, and I won't be shocked by any means if New England wins. So yeah, definitely was never a consideration for a lock or anything, because I do think the Patriots can do enough things and force some turnovers on defense and maybe run the ball enough against the Jets defensive front that I don't think is quite as good as I thought it might be going into the year so far, at least.
Well, we've gone fade the Panthers, fade the Broncos. I think fade the Giants is probably not a bad idea either these days, as the Giants hit the road to play the Browns. Browns are 6-point favorites in this one. Certainly considered it as potentially a lock of the week. Browns coming off that win in Jacksonville. So I think we talk about defense being the difference maker. I think it's 100% the difference maker in this game, because I just do not see the Giants getting a lot going offensively. Could be a long day for Daniel Jones and company.
Yeah, that's that side of the ball you have most of the concerns about. The defense, still not great, but we just saw the Vikings do some pretty good things against the 49ers defense too, right? And without the fumble by Aaron Jones, I mean, they put up 27, potentially 30 points in a different kind of version of that game. So, it's early, but yeah, they did hold, obviously the Commanders to all those field goals, but I just think that this is a Browns offense that it has competency available, and we saw it at times against the Jags. It's still not pretty. It's still probably one of the bottom 5-8 off throwing the ball. But I still think they can do enough things on the ground here against a Giants defense that it's still like, I'm not willing to say they're going to be this bad quite a second, because I still think there's some good things happening in their defensive line. But just a tough matchup where I don't see, it's like you said, it's really the flip side where that Cleveland defense kind of started finding some things. Yes, the weather played into their favor, but I just don't think the Giants have the firepower to come out there and win this game. Maybe if they stay in it, it's going to be because they're going to be running the ball. I think Singletary at times has looked pretty solid, better than expected for me early on. But it's still not enough here to pick them to go into Cleveland and get a win. I think that the Browns have enough talent. And in that week one game, like we said, there's going to be some weird results early in the year. The Browns are settling in a little bit. They're going to probably have still a pretty conservative game plan. So that's why, it stayed maybe just a little bit away from that lock, but still think the Browns I really didn't hesitate to pick them to win this game.
All right, the Bears at the Colts. The Colts are favored by a point in this game in Indianapolis. I had no idea where to go with this one. I mean, obviously a battle of two quarterbacks that are, young, trying to prove themselves at this point. Both have certainly had their issues thus far. Richardson, I mean, that's the thing, right? It's not like Anthony Richardson has played that many more games than Caleb Williams at this point, based on being out, with the injury for most of last season. But I'm really curious, about this one. I'm interested to see if either can kind of, have that big performance to lead their team to the victory, but also think it could be kind of a defensive-minded game potentially. I still think the Bears are better in that category. But, Dylan, take a chance on the home team here. Maybe Anthony Richardson breaks a couple plays with his legs, and I'll take the Colts. Slight victor here in this one.
Yeah, and they looked good on offense against a pretty tough Texans D in week one, right? So it's one, and these sample sizes, especially what you said with these young quarterbacks, the fluctuations week to week, especially with Richardson's play between week 1 and 2, could not be more stark with some of the big flash plays we saw against Houston. And I do have concerns, I'm not going to lie, about the coaching here with my pick, because I do think Steichen still ultimately, I'm going to, still overall small sample size, but going back to what he did in Philly and some of the good things they did last year after Richardson's injury, I still think they might have that edge. And that's teetering between, I'm not going to switch back because, we already don't have enough games where we're disagreeing here. But I think the big thing for me, I end up picking the Bears here. It's not really that side of the ball. It's when the Colts are on defense. I know they only give up 16 points, but it's not looked especially pretty. so I know they've had some flash plays from different guys, but some of the injuries they've already kind of gotten on that side of the ball. They've struggled to defend the run. I think this is a week where we could see Chicago's offense get going a bit. And Caleb, obviously some issues, and that offensive line has been a big problem for the Bears, obviously. But I don't know if right now with the health of the Colts defensive line, if they're going to be able to take advantage of those things as much. So I think it's a game where we see Chicago get going a bit on that side of the ball. On the flip side, I think their defense has, just to keep them in that game against Houston was really impressive. They kept getting stop after stop, making, forcing turnovers, just doing the little things where it was like, all right, this is a defense that's going to keep this game in a lot of teams. There's a reason they're, early on looking like a top 10 unit. And I think it's just that side where, if Steichen and the running game with especially using Richardson gets going, that's kind of where I do have concern about my pick here, where Indianapolis could still put up a crooked number if the Bears just cannot figure out what's happening with the scheme. But I don't know. They look like a group that is ready for the challenge on that side with the Bears defense. I think they'll do enough where the offense, against just a dramatic shift in the talent of the two defenses they just played to start the year for Chicago, going against this Colts defense instead. I think we'll see some of the flashes of what little things that are just a bit off. Another week of practicing together. And potentially getting some guys back. So I'll go with the Bears, finding a way to win this one. But yeah, there's a reason the spread is right there. A lot of the FTN, the DVOA projections have this as a 1.2 point kind of game, really. So not shocking that this one is probably going to be maybe a little more fun on Red Zone than both these, the week one game for the Bears and the Colts game last week were. And then I think ultimately, though, it's probably going to come down right to the end with either team here.
Here's a good one. The Texans 2.5 point favorites on the road against the Vikings. Can the Vikings keep their momentum going? Of course, the Texans are going to try to do the same as well. But this is one that, I think, again, if you were looking at in week 3 going into the season, you're probably thinking, well, where are the Vikings at? Especially not knowing the quarterback situation and all that. But here we are, and the Texans are only 2.5 point favorites in this game, despite, of course, looking pretty good so far. I still think the Texans are the better team, so I'm going to pick them here, although it's hard not to be intrigued by the Vikings coming off of that big win against the Niners last week.
This is a sneaky game of the week. I think we maybe just moseyed over this one, but this is a game I'm going to try to get on one of the screens. Not sure if it's going to be showing here in LA. I'll figure out a way to watch it. But yeah, I think it's a sneaky, also defensive game with the way these two teams have played. This over under 46.5, a lot higher than the ones we just mentioned. But through 2 weeks, these are two of the top 5 defenses with their efficiency numbers, at least. Minnesota, not surprising, right? They go and just hammer the Giants, and then they limit obviously no Christian McCaffrey, but there's no Christian McCaffrey in week 1, and the Niners offense looked just fine. And Minnesota still was able to confuse Brock. You had the line with Brock telling Brian Flores, your scheme is crazy. And it's something that, a lot of defense coordinators this whole offseason have been looking at, between what Mike McDonald had success with in Baltimore and bringing over to Seattle and all the different pieces of his line that are already kind of filtering through the league. I think what Flores did is the most, interesting in terms of what other teams are trying to apply, of being able to just confuse. It's not necessarily bringing more guys. It's just making it tough for offensive linemen to know where those guys are coming from, right? And changing the picture post-snap in a way that's just there's not hints being given. And I think they've done it as well as anyone. They've been able to, Harrison Smith in particular, just like his mind and what it's just fun to watch after. Not to take anything too much away from what Mike Zimmer did, but some more static defenses over the years for the Vikings, and just seeing what with him just kind of being able to just roam everywhere. And it's just been really fun to watch that side of the football for them. So it's a game that I think on that side, and another guy that they brought over from Houston, maybe a little revenge game for Blake Cashman. I know he's getting a lot of love for some of the things he's doing early on in Minnesota's scheme. So it's a game where I'd probably pick the under between the two. I still think it might be like 24-20, but that's going to get you right under that number. And on offense, we'll see how long with Sam Darnold. We've seen flashes from him in his career. Can he be consistent? Maybe this is the time. And there's plenty of guys that we're so quick to not just us, but like teams to try to capitalize on the next rookie contract and what these things can mean. Situation matters so much, right? And it's Darnold finally last year getting to be in all those coaches meetings with those QB room meetings with Shanahan and Clint Kubiak too, right? That now see what he's doing in New Orleans. I mean, just a lot of things that now with a competent with we've talked about Kevin O'Connell, how we feel about him, and I just think that Vikings group is even if there's still some things like roster wise for like a top end Super Bowl contender that still need to be done, and you wonder how consistent this can be from Darnold. I still think there are things that can carry over from him. Now, obviously the Niners were a tough defense, and we made some throws even when Jefferson was hurt. So his availability doesn't sound like it ended up being anything serious, but still, if he's hampered in any way, still have concerns overall about what that offense can consistently do against a defense for Houston. Talk about what a team that's been able to just come out and guns a-blazing and had some big plays that the Colts got, but on a down-the-down basis was pretty dang good, and right now is right up there with the Vikings in the top 5 of early efficiency defenses. So I think I just trust enough of the amount of weapons that CJ Stroud has, and the consistency we've seen with him, and the great, even when a game when he's struggling, he's still making some really fantastic plays and big third down conversions. So picking Houston, but I really think this is a game that's going to be a lot of fun. One I'll definitely be going back and watching all the way through when it's done, just because the coaching on both sides in this game and just how fun these teams have been in the early going makes it one of the better matchups of week 3 for sure. Ever find yourself holding back on travel plans because you're afraid of the language gap? Well, no need to mind the gap if you have Babbel. Designed by real people for having real conversations, Babbel gets you talking. So don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Spend the dollars on plane tickets instead and choose Babbel. Think about it. Eliminating any social anxiety as you immerse yourself into a different culture because you have basic knowledge of the language will change your trip completely. Before my next trip abroad, I'm definitely taking a few weeks of Babbel lessons. Babbel's convenient courses have helped me learn real-life conversation skills in a different language. It's easy to prep for my next trip abroad. Learning how to ask for directions, how to order food, and speak to merchants without having to consult language apps while I'm on vacation is priceless. If this sounds good to you, download Babbel. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at Babbel.com/thepass. Get up to 60% off at Babbel.com/thepass, spelled BABBEL.com/thepass. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Well, this game certainly a little bit of a deflated interest in this one. The Dolphins are at the Seahawks. Yeah. Seahawks 4.5-point favorites in this game. I felt pretty confident if Tua was under center, Seahawks would probably not be 4.5-point favorites in this one. But not to say that, we kind of look at, again, the way the Seahawks have started things off here. And we mentioned them kind of maybe coming into the season and wondering if they were one of those sort of sneaky teams. And here they are sitting atop the NFC West after 2 weeks, have yet to lose a game. But, this is still a step up in competition, even without Tua. But I think it's going to be so much different, now with him out of the mix. Like we've seen Skylar Thompson in this role before. We've seen the impact it's had on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in terms of the points that they're able to produce. And so that worries me a bit for the Dolphins. I think you could just have sort of the hangover effect here, which, we saw play out against the Bills. But I have more confidence in, the Seahawks being able to put together a game plan here that slows them down offensively. And of course, Dylan, what I like most about this matchup is we have our showdown between Mike McDaniel and Mike McDonald.
Yeah, the guys that a lot of, and I'm not blaming anyone for mixing them up just with how close the names are. I think the MAC and McDonald helps me a little bit in keeping them separate since they don't spell it and he doesn't have the capital D there. But really, and then also it's Mike McDonald and his former assistant that is now the defense coordinator Anthony Weaver in Miami. So interesting kind of ties there, but would have been a game. Would have had, like you said, a lot more juice if Tua's out there, obviously put on IR, and hope he's going to be okay. It sounds like, though, the plan for him is to come back when he potentially after the IR, maybe a little bit longer. But right now with Skylar Thompson, I know they brought in Tyler Huntley, right? I don't know how quickly that all is going to come together, but it's just a group that I'm not going to – we saw it in that – obviously Buffalo's a good team, but in that second half when he came in, it just everything basically just paused. And I know there were some promising things with him a couple of years ago when they almost beat the Bills in the playoffs. I don't know if those same things they had success with are gonna really fly here against the Seahawks defense that's flying around. And yes, there are some successful things New England did, but when they needed to, kind of bear down. And it would have been like their first really tough matchup now without Tua. Still a defense I'd kind of want to see it come together. As bad as I feel about my Rams wildcard pick at this point, I feel equally as good about picking Seattle to get in, because they do look like a team that at least both sides, even if the defense isn't going to be quite this good, and even if the offense is going to, I still think their offensive line is a major issue that ultimately will cost them. It's part of their, you look at right now, their efficiency running the ball hasn't been great for a team that has two backs like Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet. They have some moments, but overall, down again, has not been as quite of uniform as you'd like. But Geno's balling. He's got a lot of weapons, and it's kind of cooking over there with Grubb and what they're doing. So, yeah, I feel good about Seattle winning. Thought about this as a potential lock, because it's not to, it's still early on, but Miami's defense, it's Buffalo Bills are tough, but like I still saw, some moments where it just felt like there was multiple guys running open, could not stop the run. Just I know they've had some guys that have moved on and roster turnover there, and I think that it's starting to maybe cost them a bit. So I'm just a little concerned watching that defense, to the point where, this might be a game too where I look back and I'm like, how did I not consider that one as a potential lock? But I feel pretty good about Seattle winning, and if I did have to pick on the spread, I'd pick them to cover as well.
All right. Well, speaking of IR, unfortunately, something that one of these teams, well, actually, I guess both of these teams know quite well right now. Yeah. The Niners are on the road to play the Rams, which we know that's not exactly your traditional road game for the 49ers in this spot. They are 7-point favorites against the Rams, who are, if we thought the Niners were banged up with Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, we know the Rams are banged up too, with Puka out, Cooper Kupp out. And yeah, I think you just look at the spread, Dylan, and to me, it kind of tells you all you need to know. So even though I did wear the hoodie to try to give your team support, it did not impact my pick this week, as I'm going to pick the 49ers to win this game. Yeah,
the level of injuries is just insane, but and it's just hard to know exactly what it would look like. They get Alaric Jackson back from his suspension at left tackle, and that's been, whether it was Akiri in week 1, with McClendon last week. There's like some of the pass block win rate numbers are like the separation between them and the team in 31st is like more dramatic than the team in 1st and 17th. Just shows you like literally how terrible it's been. And I know the Niners defensive line isn't necessarily the group that it has been in years past. It's still a really talented group and still has Nick Bosa. And I know he got shaken up, but sounds like he's going to be a full go in this one. I see on that side of the ball, the Rams having a ton of trouble, obviously, with, as you mentioned, without Puka and still, and then with Kupp now going on IR. But that's part of it. But I really think it's the offensive line attrition. Jonah Jackson now hitting the IR. You're at least hoping they'd have somewhat of an interior healthy Avila. So, you have 2 of their 3 starting guys on the offensive line from the start of the year out. Havenstein's still been kind of getting banged up. It's just hard to watch, because it's like you don't know exactly what this team could be capable of, and we're probably not going to find out this week. Even though, I think the Niners will probably cover. The defense too for the Rams had some decent moments, and I think Jared Verse is still a bright spot. And overall, the defensive line has some talented pass rushers. But I think you saw with the run defense and how we've talked about in past years that Shanahan's just taking advantage of deficiencies at linebacker for the Rams. That got exposed to a dramatic extent against the Cardinals. A lot of plays that just didn't quite finish, obviously with Kyler, but Brock's a really elusive guy. Yes, we've seen him struggle without Deebo previously, but we've also seen him mostly struggle without Trent Williams. As long as him and now Pooney being as dominant as he's looked through the first few weeks at right guard, I think there's just enough things here where if you're a Jordan Mason fantasy owner, you're feeling pretty good about this matchup. Unfortunately for my Rams, 0-3 looks like it's staring them right in the face. Unfortunately, there, I think this is a game that if they can come out of it healthy, might be the biggest benefit when you have 2 opponents, depending on Jordan Love's availability week 5, the Bears in week 4, where it's like if there's any chance of them getting things back on track, it's probably going to be starting with winning those 2 games before their bye, not this one. But I know the Rams played the Niners a little bit closer than we expected last year, but man, the level of health of that offense line in those games for the Rams, and Puka obviously, and just overall for where that's looking like, and even on the defensive side versus this current iteration of the Rams defense, just a lot of questions, some fundamental things that have broken down, and I don't think it's going to pay off too well with a Shanahan coach team that's going to be looking for a bounce back after week 2.
Well, I don't even think you can call this one maybe sneaky good. This should be another good game. The Lions are at the Cardinals. The Lions are 3-point favorites coming off that loss at home to the Bucs. And again, the Cardinals have kind of been a team that just took it to the Rams last week and certainly looked good in week 1 against Buffalo. So, yeah, I'm excited about this one. As you know, I initially put the Cardinals down for my pick here, but I went back to the Lions. I think they figure some things out and are able to pull out a win. But again, not as confident as I probably would have been if we'd been talking about this game 3 weeks ago, because you definitely, I think, have liked a lot of what we've seen from the Cardinals to this point.
Yeah, it's. I think there's translatable things that, I mean, obviously almost beat the Bills, as they easily could have had that. So it's an offense that, even though the running game numbers aren't like perfect, they dominated on the ground for both weeks. But last week they really had no problem running right through the Rams. But it's the explosiveness of this passing game, the weapons that they have. It's obviously Marvin, talk about over week 1 overreactions, how he looked in this game. But also McBride and just other guys where it's like, all right, there's a lot of good things going. And if Kyler's balling like this, it's going to be a tough team to stop, but I just think that the total package of the Lions still, I think their defense definitely has taken a step forward. I do worry that when the Cardinals are putting the ball up, there's a chance still that they're going to have more success here, and that kind of makes it a little bit of a game. There's a reason the spread's only at 3. Game I'm a little bit worried about. The Lions' offense sometimes didn't look as just in a flow of things as they were last year. I think they'll find it eventually, but at this point, Arizona's probably played through 2 weeks better combined football. I mean, obviously some more guys went out for the Rams last week, but just look at how these 2 teams played against the Rams and how one game went to overtime and the other one was a dominant win by the other team. So just based off that, you'd have different ideas of how this game might go. I'm betting more on Detroit, though, just kind of getting back, finding a flow with their offensive line versus a defensive line that, look good against the Rams. I don't think they're going to look nearly as good against one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line in the league. And Detroit, I think they'll be able to control tempo enough, and should be a really fun game. Like you said, another sneaky game honestly could have been one of the game of the week candidates as well. But and one I'll be definitely excited to kind of look back and watch the full game back if I'm not able to catch it all in real time. But I'll go with the Lions getting a win. Maybe one that I'm going to regret, though. Something about that Cardinals offense. I want to see it, though, continued a bit, because obviously this is, we're talking about teams with the Bills and Lions that a lot of people have right there at the end of the year. So, they barely almost didn't get it done against one. If they can get it done here, the Cardinals hype train will really take off.
Well, the Chiefs, of course, able to pull one off last week against the Bengals at the buzzer. They're 3.5-point favorites on the road in Atlanta to play the Falcons, who, kind of did the same, as we said earlier, against the Eagles. And Falcons, after that week 1 loss to Pittsburgh, feeling a bit better about themselves now heading into this one. And I think that's another game that's very, very interesting when you look at just kind of, the expectations for the Falcons. And, this can be kind of that early defining win for them, even though you could probably look at last week and say that was it. But this could be another one and really be able to push them, out to a much better start than it looked like it was going to be when they lost that game to the Steelers in week 1. But I just am not going to pick against the Chiefs. I know people can say what they want about all the things that led to them winning that game, but the Chiefs are still the Chiefs. And I know, again, injury-wise, Pacheco's out. Hollywood Brown's not going to play for the regular season. Those are 2 things that could come into play here. I'm curious to see how Carson Steele is able to pick up in the running game, but it's still Patrick Mahomes on that side. And I think even though I would not like this 3.5-point spread, I could see this being a field goal game. I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win it.
Yeah, I think it's the fact it's only 3.5, and we're not picking it as the lock kind of shows you that the Falcons did kind of show something in that last game. I think some of the rust with Kirk got shaken off. Some of the predictability that got called out in week 1 against the Steelers got shaken off too. It was also Zach Robinson's first time calling plays. And the team now, this will be an interesting kind of situation to see how they play against a Chiefs defense that hasn't looked quite as dominant as last year. What the Bengals are a team that's giving them trouble over the course of the last however many years. The Ravens offense is very good. So it's still a Chiefs defense that hasn't, I'm going to wait to hold out anything too much. I still think Spags and what they're able to dial up it ultimately makes them a really talented group and a tough unit. And I'm still picking the Chiefs here to win, but excited to see what the Falcons can kind of build on it. That ended up being potentially, with this game against Kansas City, a season saving kind of win. If we look back and if they're in the playoff hunt, be like, man, it's so crucial that they're able to get that one against the Eagles. Could totally see that happening. The defense for Atlanta has been better than expected early on. Hasn't been perfect, but it's, for all the struggles that Atlanta's had with their own red zone scoring, been kind of impressed with what Atlanta's defense has been able to largely do. Not a perfect group, but one that I think has looked more competent. It's getting creative too with some of the things they're doing, especially against the Eagles this past game. Didn't have to do as much against Pittsburgh, but still looked solid enough there. So I think they'll make it tough on Kansas City. But I still think that it's Patrick Mahomes. It's prime time. Not going to be picking against him. I still think there's more to the Chiefs team. I still think that if I had to pick on the spread, I think they're still going to cover. But half point is tough. 3 feels like a good figure where it's like the Chiefs are up 2 scores, the Falcons score late to make it 3 points, then don't recover the onside. Like that, if that plays out exactly, we'll talk about that. But still some things on offense though for Atlanta running the ball where I do wonder if maybe they'll have some success here and keep it close. Should be a game that maybe after week 1 looked like, is this going to be that Chiefs are going to blow them out? Now it suddenly has a lot more intrigue and could be a fun one.
Yeah, that is, as you said, the Sunday night game because there is 2 Monday night games this upcoming week. I'm not a fan of it, Dylan. I don't like the 2 Monday night games. But the Jags are at the Bills. The Bills are 5-point favorites in this game. Boy, you talk about probably one of the more frustrating teams in the NFL. The Jags right now, with maybe, how things were going against the Dolphins. They lose that game. Then, you think you're going to get a bounce back win against the Browns. They lose that game. Now they got to go to Buffalo. So they're staring down, I think, the likelihood of 0-3. I'm picking the Bills here because we said going the season. I just think that, I don't know, it just felt like the Bills were being the team that even though Josh Allen lost all these different pieces, I just didn't think people were still giving them enough credit for how good they could be. And I think if they were to win this game, start 3-0, again, we kind of see what the Dolphins have taken a step back with no Tua. Jets, I think, are still figuring some things out. I don't think they're to the level of the Bills right now, and the Patriots, kind of in that same spot. So this would be a huge win for the Bills to keep kind of ahead of their competitors in the AFC East.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this Sean McDermott needing credit for this defense being consistently good, but I think it's just another case where they've lost so many guys and they still go out there and dominate. Even before Tua got hurt, they were the Dolphins were still going to put up some points, but it was a group that was forcing some turnovers. Yes, there's some missed fires too, but I think that side of the ball has really impressed early on with where I think they're going to be able to kind of stand up. But it's the other side where Buffalo's leaned in on 6 offensive linemen and just kind of playing a more smash mouth style than they've really embraced with as things kind of change around the league. And I just wonder with you combine that with Josh Allen, limiting the turnovers and obviously had the hand injury he's dealing with, but still had the flash plays, still at times would have maybe the sure first down, instead fires down and hits a running back over Jalen Ramsey, right? Like he's still going to do some Josh Allen things. But the Jaguars have given the Bills struggles. I was looking kind of back and, we've talked about some of the Josh Allen on Josh Hines Allen now matchups, and it hasn't always ended well for Buffalo, but those games are in Jacksonville. I think this one on a Monday night with the momentum they build after an offseason where, I told you even before we made the week 1 picks, I'm like, if I could switch one of my preseason predictions, it's having the Bills win the division over Miami. I would have swapped those, and I still feel pretty strongly about that. I think the Bills are one of the best teams in the league, and I think that it's just a lot of it is because of Josh. And on the Jaguars side, like you mentioned, they're staring 0-3 in the face, so there's going to be urgency, but man, I just came away disappointed with the offensive effort. I know that Cleveland has a solid group on that side, but just so many things that couldn't kind of get going. And maybe this is a week where we see that, but I don't know. I think the Buffalo's got a really strong case in the way that they're attacking it and the way they're able to run the ball and balance those kind of sides of things. It's been really fun to see. I think the Bills are just a more complete team. So didn't consider it as a lock, but with the spread being at 5 was a little high, but I still think the Bills are, for me, it wasn't a really tough choice to pick them to win this game.
All right, and then we finish up with the Commanders at the Bengals. The Bengals 7.5-point favorites in this game. The Bengals, again, they're probably shaking their head right now because we talked about it. Favorites in week 1 against the Patriots, couldn't get it done. Thought they were about to beat the Chiefs, didn't happen. Now they're 0-2, must-win spot. I'm going to pick them here. The Commanders, meanwhile, I think are just a team that, it's going to be exciting to see, I think, how the offense continues to develop this year. Not just with Jaden Daniels, too. I think Brian Robinson, someone who just does not get enough credit for, what he brings to the table. But that 1-2 punch of Robinson and Eckler is at least intriguing. And so the offense will continue to, I think, develop from here. But I can't. There's no way I'm picking them. I could see this being maybe not the same as it was against the Bucs, but I could see the Bengals covering this with ease.
Yeah, I think they're just a superior football team. After a week 1 game where you thought that was the case against New England, and we saw some of the struggles, obviously really impressed. I know that they've had these kind of games against Kansas City again over the years, even when the Chiefs have been a better team and got the better of the Bengals. A lot of really close games where Burrow looks good. I was impressed with some of the other weapons stepping up with T continuing to be out. I think as Chase also getting back in the building, be more acclimated, those things will kind of work themselves out. Trey Hendrickson was a one-man wrecking crew at times with his performance. A pass rush that's still outside of him. You want to expect some things, but I think against a Washington offense line that's still a work in progress, we saw that really kind of stifle some of the things they wanted to do in week 1 against Tampa Bay. I just think, Cincinnati, a team that deserves to be better than 0-2 with the way that they played last week. They're obviously a couple of little plays here and there. We're talking about a 1-1 football team. I think their defense in particular, with Lou Anarumo, I know that the secondary is still maybe some questions overall, but has looked pretty solid in the early going. A lot of tough contested plays for the Chiefs, and still not. With Washington, exciting moments for sure. With Jaden, I think it's less about him and more about the situation around him. Not even just the roster. I've expressed in the off season that I still had concerns about Cliff as the guy to be the offensive mind with. We're seeing what Kyler and this Arizona's offense is doing without him running the show there. I know it's been a couple of years, but nonetheless, still think there's some stagnant things, some moments where still as a Terry McLaurin believer, always grabbing him deep in fantasy drafts and still waiting for that moment where he's fully embraced for what he is. It hasn't happened for sure yet here. Commander's still a team that's really fun to monitor, but I just wonder about some of the situations with around Jaden. And I think Burrow kind of found a gear where I don't think they're going to let this one go. I don't think they're going to just like have the tough defeat and they come out and just are in a slog. I think maybe there'll be some drives where that's the case, but snap to snap game throughout the course of the game, I think they're going to figure some things out. And overall, Cincinnati will do enough. They've run the ball quite well. Zach Moss has had some explosiveness in that running game. So I think there's some things where they're just a superior team. There's a reason that the spread's so high. Again, didn't think about picking that half point. If it was 6.5, I would have really thought about it, but 7.5, I'll stay away from, but I'm still picking Cincinnati to win.
There you go. There are picks for week 3 in the NFL. Sure to be wrong because, it's just kind of, like I said, quite a few spreads that are on the lower end of things. So a lot of good games, I think, on this week's schedule. So there you go. There are thoughts, but of course, Dylan, lots of stuff over at Clutch Points to get everybody ready for week 3 in the NFL. So everybody know where they can find all that.
Yeah, injury news, all the, breakdowns of these matchups, fantasy, start sit-em articles. You can find all in the NFL section of ClutchPoints.com, also the fantasy sports section and the drop down. You can find that for all our fantasy content. You can go to the Clutch Points app to follow all these games and also all the same news, fantasy advice, whatnot in the Clutch Points app in the NFL section.
Yep, check it all out there. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Any podcast app you use, search for Establish the Pass. And thanks as always for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Establish the Pass podcast.